Welcome to the Casey Digital Podcast. This episode I've got Sarah McDowell from Like Mind Media. She's an SEO specialist and she also runs her own podcast called SEO SAS, which is really kind of a journey that they've been through. They're a lot further along than I am in my kind of journey with regards to podcasting. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned both from an SEO and marketing perspective, as well as creating your own content, creating your own podcast and really making it a success over a period of time. So hope you enjoy the episode. So, Sarah, for those who don't know who you are, would you like to just give a quick overview and a quick introduction to yourself?
Yes, so my name is Sarah McDowell and I am an SEO specialist at Like Mind Media, which is a digital marketing agency based in Loughborough. And as a side hustle, I'm also the co-host of the SEO SAS Podcast, which is a weekly podcast that covers SEO topics, and we get guests like yourself because you obviously came on one. So that is who I am and what I do.
Cool. Thanks for that. And obviously, as a quick precursor to this, that our kind of initial conversations mainly started out by me just being a fan of your podcast, because I think it's really good and informative. So if anybody's out there and they want to listen and they're into SEO, they want to learn more about SEO, I think it's a really good podcast with Sarah and Hannah, kind of spreading the word out there, actually going into quite a lot of detail and quite a lot of practical information. So that was where I kind of first found out about you guys. And then from there, I shamelessly contacted you and said, if I'm starting out my own podcast as well, if you ever want to come on, we can always reciprocate kind of thing. So I suppose the conversation's gone from there, really, hasn't it?
Yes, definitely. So obviously, it's like conversations, like having conversations with you and the conversations that we have with other people on the podcast. It's just a great way of learning and continuing to learn about the industry and SEO. And I do think there is a lot of podcasts out there, and they all cover a load of different topics and subjects. But yeah, it's really great. What I kind of like about the SEO industry is everyone, and it's even in the podcast industry, everyone is so sort of helpful. And if you've got a question, people will try and get an answer to, or like there's so many people that I've had conversations about their podcast, and it's just a great way of sharing ideas and knowledge, isn't it, about what's working and what's not.
Yeah, I think it's a much better way of networking than going to a lot of events or maybe talking to people on LinkedIn. You feel like you're having a lot of surface level conversations, but I think a lot of my podcasts, when I'm interviewing people and I'm talking to them, it's for about half an hour to an hour, and I feel like I really kind of get to know that person. And then I feel like not only from a learning perspective, but it's good to kind of network and understand what that person's kind of journey's been. So that's what I wanted to kind of cover with you today and on this episode. So we'll kind of get into the kind of more information about yourself and a bit about your kind of history in the game, so to speak. How did it all kind of start out for you in the industry?
So industry as a whole, not podcast, but how I got into marketing.
From a broader sense,
yeah,
and then we will hone down into how you guys have got going on the SEO SAS podcast as well.
Okay, so I stumbled into marketing. So I actually studied dance and culture at university, and quickly realised that I couldn't really make a living in the principle of dancing that I was good at, which was African. But anyway, that's a whole different topic, and I'll move on.
That is a bombshell to start on. You started out as an African dancer.
Yeah, and now I do SEO.
Right, okay. Wow, okay.
But yeah, basically I finished university, I went traveling for a bit, and then I realised that I needed a job. So I applied for a reception role at a SEO agency, and they already filled the reception role, but they were looking for people to grow their SEO team, and they wanted people who had no experience because they wanted people who they could sort of get in at the bottom and work up, basically. And that's
kind of educate you and teach you their ways of working and processing and stuff.
Yeah, and I did. So when I first got into SEO, I was doing the link building. And I was learning on the job what was working, what wasn't, also creating content as well. So I went in at a very basic level, but I was there for about 2-3 years, and I progressed in that role. So I went from link builder to content writer, to then when I left that business, I was a project coordinator. So I was coming up with ideas, talking to clients, reporting back on what had happened. And then after having about 2-3 years experience in agency, I decided to try some roles in-house just to see what the difference would be, because obviously working for an agency is very different to working in-house. So I did that for a bit. So I worked for a travel company. I worked for a solicitor's firm as well. It was actually at the solicitor's firm where I met my co-host of SEO SAS. So we met there. We sort of realised that we both had a passion about talking and discussing SEO and stuff. So that's how I first met Hannah. And then from working in-house, and then went back into agency side, because I miss the challenges of working in agency, because obviously with agency you get to work with lots of different industries, you get to work with lots of different people, and I realised that's what I enjoyed more. And then before joining the agency that I'm with now, Like My Media, I did own my own business for a bit. And that was really good. So I was going for about a year, and I made a profit, which I'm told in the first year of business is really good. But so I had clients, I was making money, but to be completely honest with you, I got really lonely, because running a business on your own is quite daunting, and I just missed being with a team and like celebrating successes together, or when things go wrong, which they do in marketing because you're trying stuff. I just felt too much pressure on myself. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, we get that a lot. We get that a lot when we get freelancers coming in, and we get people who are kind of one-man bands. I think they actually like coming into an agency to actually work in an environment with other people, just to be surrounded by other people. You know what I mean? Not necessarily just to obviously collaborate and to learn and all that stuff. I think it's just being around other people. It can be quite a lonely place starting up your own thing and trying to make it a success. So it's,
definitely.
I suppose that's a really good summary of kind of what you've done throughout your career. But wow, you've done in-house, you've done agency, you've done startup, like freelance. You've covered kind of all different spectrums, and you kind of landed now where you're at Like My Media, where you're in an agency role. And what are the kind of, from your perspective, what are the kind of main benefits or the things that you like the most about working within an agency?
So I definitely get a lot from working in a team, just brainstorming ideas, sharing knowledge about, so someone might read an article about something that's changed in the industry, or something that Facebook's trying, or something that Google is updating, sort of thing. So just by having conversations and working together to brainstorm ideas for campaigns, for clients and ourselves, I just find that marketing is more successful when you've got people together, working together, throwing out ideas. Some ideas will stick, some ideas won't. But I prefer working in-house in an agency with a team, just because I just find that I work best because I can bounce my ideas off of the people, and then someone else will bounce off an idea, and it just sort of ping-pongs all over the place until you come up with this, like the golden idea that everyone's really happy about. I also like working in an agency because there's people to celebrate successes with. Also, if things aren't going to plan with a campaign, if you're working with a team, you can, so we're always transparent with our clients, and we'll always, like, if something's not working quite how we expect, we will talk to them about it and say, this is not quite working and we believe this is the reason why, and we can work together to sort of come up with a solution for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and people's backgrounds as well. So within our industry, within our agency, we've got an ex-journalist. We've got someone who does music on the side. We've got someone who, so the boss, Paul Ince, he has been in marketing for a while, and he delivers workshops. He's really good on the strategy, on the bigger picture side of things. We've got, so it's just people's backgrounds and even their personal backgrounds as well. It's just varied, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think I'd echo that in our agency as well. You meet so many different personalities, and I think the thing that I find one of the most rewarding is when a team of people come together and we actually come up with an idea that is successful, or we overcome a challenge or whatever. And it feels better when you do it as a group of people, because we've got different levels of experience. I've been in this industry for about 13 years now. But I've got some people who've been in the industry for a year. They've never, they've not really seen that kind of growth over a period of time with a client, or a website launching, or a campaign being successful, or a really high return on investment, or something going viral, from a social media perspective. So I think that collaborative approach is definitely the kind of thing that I need. Plus, I think from my perspective, I don't actually have a talent. You have a talent for link building and technical SEO and content writing.
I thought you were going to say dancing then.
Well, you didn't let me finish. And African dancing. I think the thing that I find the most rewarding, because I don't actually do any of those things, I kind of oversee the thing, what the team actually produce. I think it's just great to kind of see what people can do and how people can progress as well, which is really interesting. So you fell into it, kind of thing. Was there anything that when you first went into the kind of job interviews, and when you were first looking around at after you finished traveling and you were looking at, right, okay, I'm looking to get into a job, was there anything that drew you to digital initially, the digital marketing aspect of things?
Well, when I was hunting for a job?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose. So during my degree at uni, we did, so obviously it was dance, but there was the theory side as well. So we did do modules of marketing and business, and there was a module called facilitation about getting dance into the community and stuff.
Yeah.
So I suppose I dipped my toes a little bit, and then I suppose the reason I went to the SEO agency was just because it was at the time where things were starting to blow up with like technology and the internet and people, and the internet developing more and more. So when I first got into the industry, it was very different to how it is now. But I suppose I was drawn into the digital side because, I don't know, because if with any marketing, I feel with digital, it's easier to measure. And I suppose you can measure traditional campaigns by putting, I don't know, like a code or something to track. But I just find with digital, there's more data, and it is easier to measure, and you can measure different things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It feels a bit like with like kind of offline and more traditional marketing, you feel like you put a lot of time, energy and effort into things, but you're not really sure if it works. And I think that, I'm not saying not all of it, but I think compared to the level of feedback that you're getting from a digital perspective, it allows you to hone the campaigns, improve your craft, and just from a personal standpoint, know if you're doing a good job or not.
Definitely. It's always good to know that what you're doing is sort of working, isn't it?
Sort of.
Oh, a lot working. It is working, 100% working.
Yeah, of course. With, like in the early stages, then when you were first starting out, in kind of the initial roles that you were working in, what were the kind of early lessons that you learned? Because obviously, African dance to travel to optimizing for Google are like stark ends of the spectrum. I know we're joking, but they really are. What were those kind of early lessons that you kind of learned in that process?
Well, I suppose in the early days, I was quite nervous about owning up to not knowing stuff, because I thought, they've employed me for a reason. I've got to know everything, sort of thing. So I was quite nervous about that, and nervous about asking questions or putting my hand up and saying, oh, I don't know this, or looking for like courses or reading up on stuff, just because I thought like when I first started that I should know it because I've been hired for it. But then sort of as my career progressed and I started asking questions, I then realized it was okay to like own up to not knowing about something, or a term or a measurement, or about best practice or something. It was okay to ask questions, because I think if you do ask questions, that's when like you can continue to expand your knowledge and stuff. And I suppose another thing that I learned was about not taking stuff as gospel from people and trying stuff out for yourself. So there's loads of like marketing experts, and I hate to use the word guru. I think we should have like a forfeit every time the word guru is used. There should be something. But there's loads of people giving their opinion on how best to do stuff and what you should do. And some people just run with it and do it without actually testing and trying and seeing like, okay, so this guy or this lady is saying this is the best way of doing it. Before I go ahead and change it and start doing that, test it. And I suppose anyone can say anything, and not everything, it's not with marketing, it's not a one size fits all. What works for one industry and one business won't necessarily work the same for the other. So testing as well. And also, sorry, this is where I'm blabbing. And if you do listen to the SEO SAS podcast, you'll kind of understand that I'm the blabber and Hannah's the one that hones me back in and is like, right, this is what we're talking about, Sarah. But anyway,
I'm just going to set you free, though. I'm not going to stop you.
Please do. I'll end up talking about banana hammocks.
Yeah, or something crazy like that.
But what was I? I've really forgotten my train of thought. So
You talked about some of the early lessons in your career. I think initially you said, obviously, which I think is really good advice to anybody starting out in the industry, is don't try and, you're not expected to know everything, if you're at a certain level. And I think that always asking for help is a massive part of it. And I think the other thing, that don't take things for gospel, I think that's really good advice as well for anybody starting out in career.
And another one that's just like pinned into my head is that you're not a super person. So as well as it's okay to raise your hand and be like, I don't know this. It's okay to also say when work is getting too much as well. Because I've worked in previous places where there's been a quite toxic atmosphere about long hours, always being seen busy, always like working yourself to death, really. And I think it wasn't until I got out of those toxic workplaces that I realized. So, like my media, really good at that. So Paul is all for having that work-life balance, and we've recently actually introduced flexible working. So with flexible working, it's about work fitting around life rather than life fitting in around work. Is that the right way around?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just think when you're in a more positive atmosphere like that, you work better because you feel more appreciated as an employee. You become more creative as well. So if you do feel like you've got too much on your plate or you've been given too much stuff, talk to someone. Otherwise, you're just going to end up stressing yourself out. You're not going to end up delivering, and then you're just going to feel bad about yourself. But then if your employer is a bit like, well, you've got to do it, then get out of there. There's better places to work where they understand that work-life balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything that I think the 3 points that you just said around those early lessons in your career actually relate to mental health and do relate to, how you're actually feeling in yourself. And from an employer's perspective, not just thinking about the individual's mental health, it also impacts productivity. So if you're, if you're stressed or if you're stretched 5 days a week or 6 days a week, if you have to come in and work over a weekend, which I'm sure a lot of people in the industry have done, I've done it quite a lot, taking work home, etc., you'll end up burning out anyway. So you're not going to get that high level of productivity. And I think particularly in roles like yours, and even in mine to some extent, but more so I would say in the creative roles, because I still think that digital is a creative role. You have to come up with campaigns and ideas and content ideas, etc. I think that the balance is really important for creativity. I've seen people burn out and not lose the creativity because it's still with them. I just think that they feel like they've not got the headspace because they're too focused on a deadline or something which isn't related to the quality of the work. It's more a case of getting the job out the door. So I think they're really good piece of advice.
And I suppose sometimes you do have to put the time in sometimes, don't you? Because I don't know, maybe you're working on a really big campaign and it's launch day, or you run an event, and so there's like the build up before and on the day and stuff. But I think it's the acknowledgement of, okay, when you know that you've got a full on day or a full on couple of days, it's sort of making sure that leading up to that, you are looking after yourself. Do you know what I mean? So, because I didn't want to paint like a too idyllic picture that like it's all roses and it's all about like doing 4-hour working day. That's not realistic, is it? But I think it's just about being mindful about your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the shift is really, it's quite prevalent in our sector, in digital in general, but also like agencies as well. You do get it where it is, quite a modern way of thinking. There are a lot of sectors that are still catching up though. So I think that's just kind of generally we all need to kind of catch up to the same level. So we're not kind of working ourselves to the bone kind of thing. Just moving on to kind of the podcast, SEO SAS, can you talk us through that, kind of how it started and kind of some of the lessons learned in going through that process? Because I think for someone like myself, I've only, this is like episode number 8, I think, or 8 or 9 of my overall podcast. You guys have put out how many episodes now?
I think I should know this sort of stuff at the top of my head. We're around about.
Well, I'm asking you. How many? Sorry.
I think we've around about the 50 mark.
Yes.
So, because we do a weekly podcast and it's been going for a year and 2 months. So, yeah, just over 50. Obviously, we've missed some weeks, but yeah. So yeah. But.
Then at the beginning, I know you said that you met Hannah at one of the previous roles that you were in. How did it all start for you guys?
Yes, so I met Hannah when working at the solicitors firm, and we both we struck up a friendship quite soon. Like it wasn't long before we were out at the local pub drinking and chatting and what have you, but we also realized that we had a passion when it came to SEO and the digital side of things. So even when we stopped working together, obviously we would still stay in touch and talk about other things, but we were quite passionate about carrying on the conversation about SEO and digital and things like that. And we went to Brighton SEO, which is the one of the biggest SEO conferences in the UK. And it was a couple of years ago, a few years ago. It was the first time that I went, and I went with Hannah. And we sort of realised that at the time, SEO was a very male-dominated industry. So a lot of the speakers were male and a lot of the attendees were male. Now, that was a few years back. So nowadays, we are getting better. And I think that's across the board with, your typical male-orientated jobs. We are getting better because there's the awareness there. But I just saw an opportunity and a niche that there wasn't at the time a female-led SEO podcast. So after a lot of pestering to Hannah and like, please can we do a podcast? Please can we do a podcast? Let's do a podcast. She finally said yes. And yeah, that's how it kind of was born. And what we were quite passionate about is, I think SEO gets this reputation of being quite boring, and like the joke in our team is like, SEO is the boring thing. Like, people jokingly do an eye roll when we talk about it. So we wanted to sort of address that, and we wanted to make SEO more fun, and we also make it more accessible to small businesses as well, because SEO has been around for a while now. Small business owners and quite a few people who about SEO, but they don't understand quite what it is or how to do it. So that was another thing that we wanted to cast, that so it's called SEO SAS because SAS stands for Special Answering Service. So that is what it is. So each week we delve into a topic, and we want to make it easier for small businesses to sort of understand. So yes, does that answer those questions?
Absolutely, yeah. I think overall the kind of I completely agree with the male-dominated area. I've found that some of the best SEOs I've ever worked with are female because of I think it's more a training thing because we've got a girl in our team called Imogen, and she's absolutely brilliant. She came very similar to the story where you said you come in as kind of a raw, ready to learn, but you don't really have any skills or experience. Imogen joined us as an apprentice, and she's probably nearly SEO manager level, and she's probably only got like 2 years experience of actually doing, but she's really taken to it and she absolutely loves it. So I think that, like I said on the episode of the podcast where I came on for you guys, I think it's great what you've done. I think that we need, people need role models. People need people who are kind of setting the standard and showing that there are different ways of doing things, in different industries. So I think that's really good, and hats off to you guys for doing that. With regards to the kind of, because I do find it quite challenging when I'm running my own podcast. Obviously, you've got a partner in crime, which I'm assuming makes it easier because you guys can bounce ideas off each other and have conversations and stuff. But what are the main challenges that you guys have found, with running your own podcast?
Good question, because I was very naive when I first set up the podcast, because I thought to myself, right, podcasts are going to be around 30 minutes to an hour. It's not going to take long to record. Jobs are good in. It's going to not take up much of our time. I was so wrong, because obviously with a podcast, you've got to plan it, you've got to record it, you've got to edit it, you've got to promote it, and you've got to push it out there, sort of thing. So I think time for us, because it is a side hustle, and both me and Hannah lead so we both got full-time work, we've both got hobbies. So I obviously do roller derby, which we talk about all the time on our podcast. Hannah's into hiking and mountain climbing, but we've also got quite full-on social lives with like family and stuff. It is hard finding time, and it took us a while, because we did get to a point where we did feel like the podcast was taking over a little bit, and it was maybe taken a bit over our friendship as well, which we were quite mindful about because we didn't want to have a fallout. Not that we would, but you know what I mean, like tensions and stuff.
Yeah.
So it took us some time, but we realised that we need to get a lot more efficient in how we're recording. So now we will do a lot of batch recording. So we'll set aside a whole day that we do it, and there's some efficiencies that I found in like publishing and creating. And I suppose as well, there's not so much, because we've grown the podcast and people are getting more and more aware about it, people will come to us wanting to come on the podcast as well. So I suppose that's easier as well, because rather than going out and finding guests and stuff, people come to us. So we're quite lucky in that sense as well. But yeah, I mean, it's challenging, but we love it at the same time. And I suppose that's what life is like, isn't it? That some of the things that you most love to do, they are challenging at times, but it's just finding a way of dealing with it.
And just a quick word to how you guys are set up in terms of equipment and what software you use for editing. Can you just give us a quick insight to that? Because there are a couple of people who might be listening to this who I'm sure will be interested.
Okay, yes. So the equipment we use Rodecaster. So Rodecaster is like a mixing desk, and it comes with microphones and headphones and all that jazz. And I think you can get like a setup kit. So if you search Rodecaster Pro podcaster kit or something, you'll find it. So that's the sort of setup that we use. We use Audacity to edit, which is free. You don't have to pay for Audacity. There's other software that you can use, I think like GarageBand, and I can't think of other ones off the top of my head at the moment.
I use Anchor to edit mine, and yes. I keep it really simple because it's mainly a one-to-one thing. But I think as these two of you guys, I think it makes sense for you guys to actually, step it up a level with the software that you're using and stuff.
And I mean, with even so when we first started the podcast, we didn't have this swanky Rodecaster setup. We just shared a microphone, but I think that when we move to using the more sort of professional setup, you can tell a difference with the podcast. So if you listen to our very first episode compared to one of the more recent ones, hopefully you'll, because obviously with anything you hope that you get better, don't you? But yes, what else do we use? We use Anchor as well to publish the podcast. There's also a really cool tool called Captivate, which is similar to Anchor, but you get more information and more functionality with it, sort of thing. So yes, and I think we paid for a jingle as well, but I think we only paid like $5. So we went on something like Audio Jungle or something like that, and we paid for a jingle because we thought, well, we're going to have this podcast for a while. Let's have a jingle sort of thing. So
yeah, no, that's great. I think with regards to how you guys have gone about it, it looks like obviously you're learning as you go along, and I think if you look back at anybody's podcast and you look at the first episode, it sounds completely different, to where they eventually get to. I'm personally still striving. I'm going to be getting a microphone set up soon, and we're doing we're building a like you were saying earlier, you're doing a podcast shed. We're going to build a mini podcast studio. I'm currently recording all the podcasts in a greenhouse in U Space, which is a co-working space just across the road from where we are. But yeah, my first podcast, I recorded it on my AirPods driving my car. I was driving to work and I just thought, oh, there's all these things that I want to talk about. Let's just record it. That's a good idea.
No, I love that though, because sometimes I think some people fear not doing stuff because it's not polished enough, when sometimes you just got to go ahead and do it. Like there's a lot of ideas or stuff that doesn't get done because people are like, oh, it's not quite ready, or I've not got quite the equipment, or I can't do it for a reason. Sometimes you just got to do stuff, don't you? You've got to get stuff out the door.
Yeah, I think anybody that listens to my podcast knows that the audio quality is not the highest at my list. But I think, like you said, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm more of a get stuff out there, learn about it, and you're almost going through a process, aren't you? Because
Definitely.
publishing content out there is not an easy thing to do. It doesn't matter if you're a vlogger, if you're a content writer, or if you're a podcaster. You've got to put stuff out there, find out what's working, what isn't working, and learn as you go along. Like I said, my first one, you can hear the car engine, you can hear my indicator. I might have even been like beeping my horn at people driving through Manchester. But yeah, it was. It's good. I think it's good to go through that journey, though. You know, if it's
Yeah.
polished and perfect from day one, I feel a little bit like, I don't know, like that's just not me. So yeah, I think
And
sorry, just to finish off, I was just going to say, I think a lot of I can definitely tell the difference in the sound quality from your podcast from the early stage through to where you guys are at now. So it is working.
cool. The only thing that I was going to add about not being polished is like authenticity works, being raw, because there is a trend now. Because if you think about videos and stuff, I went to a talk, either Brighton SEO or Search Leads or something, and it was a lady who was talking about getting into magazines and newspapers, and she was giving the advice that about using raw authentic videos rather than ones that look really polished, because if they look more raw, they look like they're from everyday people that people resonate more with. So there is a place for it, for being raw.
Yeah, absolutely. And what have you found the most rewarding? You know, from while you've been working on your podcast and the things that you've been doing. You know, what are the things that you think? Well, you know, wow, that's actually really good.
I I think what makes it most rewarding for me would be when people say good comments about the podcast, or they reference you, or they share something. So I remember. So we recently set up an email address, so people could easily email the show. And I got so excited when we got our first email to that email address. I think I scared my girlfriend at the time, because I all of a sudden just screaming, like, Cass, oh my God. And she thought like something awful had happened. And she was like, what? And I was like, we've got an email. And yeah, she eye rolled and was like, really? You gave me a heart attack for no reason there. But the reason why that really excited me was because someone took time out of whatever they were doing, and it was a long, lengthy email. And in the email they were saying like how much they love the podcast, how much they're learning from it, and they even gave us some ideas for other topics and stuff. And I just thought, wow, like that person, it wasn't like a quick email like, yeah, you're great. It would have taken like 10 minutes. Do you know what I mean? They've actually spent time sending us an email. So when we first got that was amazing. But every time we get a nice review, or someone like says something about it on a social media platform, or I had it the other day where someone on Twitter said that there needs to be a book written about SEO analogies, and someone said, oh wow, SEO SAS have done a whole episode about this. So when people are sharing, and then also when people are coming to me wanting to come on the podcast, that's quite rewarding as well, because obviously they've heard about you or they've been listening to the podcast and they respect it enough to want to come on. So that's rewarding, about like people saying nice things.
Yeah, I mean that kind of, like you said, you do put a lot of graft into it. A lot of hard yards go into actually producing one episode, never mind 50 odd or wherever you guys are at. So yeah, no, I think that's really kind of nice that's the bit that's the most rewarding. I think with regards to one of the things that I do get confused about though with podcasting is the analytics aspect of it is still catching up. You know, particularly with I get basic analytics data, you know, in terms of feedback and everything else like that. Obviously, there's the reviews and everything else that you can get. Is the software that you're using a little bit more advanced from an analytics perspective than Anchor?
I'd love to say yes, but so I'm still using Anchor because I'm a creature of habit. So even though there is like other tools, publishing platforms that I should be using, I've not got round to it yet because I know Anchor, I know where everything is, I know how to publish. But I do get that frustration about analytics because, I mean, Anchor's great in the sense of it gives you breakdown of demographics, doesn't it? And it gives you listens per episode and total listens sort of thing. But I'd like drilled down demographics, or what isn't obvious with Anchor is when it says total plays for an episode, it doesn't say whether they're unique listens, so you don't know whether it's my mother listened to the same episode 5 times. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, you have the same problem.
I do think. Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, no, I think the analytics aspect's catching up. I know there was a post recently, I put it on LinkedIn, around Spotify kind of upping their game when it comes to the analytics behind podcasting. But I think that's something that will naturally evolve. Obviously, the industry and the sector is growing and growing, so I'm sure it'll catch up. I think that's one of the things that, from a feedback and perspective, you kind of do need that little bit of extra detail and data as to why things are working and you can improve your content in the future. But apart from that, obviously, it's great that you're getting that level of feedback, on your podcast. With regards to the kind of what's the plan for 2020 overall? Are you guys just going to keep cracking on doing the same thing, or have you got any kind of big plans?
Well, we obviously want to continue to grow it. So we've got sort of goals sort of set up of like how many listeners we get per episode or listeners total. So obviously we've got goals of what we want to push that up to. But it's just the awareness of it. So we started to put ourselves out there more. So for example, me on your podcast, thank you for having me. Yeah. But it's just the awareness side and getting out of the comfort zone. So obviously when you're doing your own podcast, you have control of that. You have control of the questions, you have control of what goes out there. So when you go on someone else's podcast, that control's gone, sort of thing. So and it is. So this is the 3rd podcast that I've been on, and the first one was quite daunting, and I did get a bit of imposter syndrome, like, why me? Why do people want to hear it? And sometimes you just got to say, stop thinking about that, Sarah. Someone's asked you, you've got experience, just go for it, sort of thing. So yeah, I suppose goals are getting ourselves out of our comfort zones, being on more people's podcasts, growing it. It'd be nice to make some money from it one day, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, we were very casual in how we set up the podcast. So you know what I mean? There's no sort of, it's not like a business setting up a podcast and needing like strict targets or a return of investment. Do you know what I mean? It's quite, and I suppose if we set too many targets, I don't want to take the fun away from it as well. So yeah. No,
so it's a good passion project, and like you said, a bit of a side hustle where you can get a different kind of gratification from your experience and knowledge in the sector.
And I like talking as well. So at uni, I got involved in radio, and unfortunately, I didn't become a famous radio DJ. But not yet. Not yet.
Still time.
Yeah, I mean, Radio 1 or Capital could be listening to this very podcast right now and be like, we need Sarah on. But I think
with your African dance background, I can't see why they wouldn't turn it down.
I mean, they'd be stupid, really, wouldn't they?
So just finishing off then, just on the kind of SEO kind of podcast, SEO SAS podcast. If you were to give advice out there to people who are starting their own podcast, if you were to give them maybe kind of a top 3 tips, what would your top 3 tips be?
Am I allowed to swear, or do you have no swear?
Hannah's not here. You can say whatever the fuck you want.
You just score. This is great. I feel safe. Don't be shit. Offer value. Be funny. And be educational. That's 4. Sorry.
It's okay. So
I gave more than 3. I got a bit excited.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I suppose just quickly going more into those. So with every episode that we put out, we're always thinking about what's the value. What are we giving to someone? Is it educational? Is it a bit of fun? Is it emotional? Do you know what I mean? Think about the value you're giving to someone. Consistency as well. Consistency is key. If you try and come up with a schedule for your podcast and stick to it, then people sort of know when to expect your podcast, and they get, so I don't know, so we do a podcast every Sunday at 9. People get into that habit of knowing when to expect the next one, sort of thing. So consistency is key. And yes, and whilst you are offering value, be entertaining as well, because there's so many podcasts out there which are quite boring, and it pains me to say because I hate saying bad stuff about people, but yeah, don't bore people. Have something, have personality, or have a feature, or do something that is entertaining for people.
I think that's really good advice. Thank you. I'm taking that personally as well. Don't be bored. Cool. So I think what I wanted to kind of not end with, but kind of go through is kind of almost like a quick fire round where I'm just gonna throw some questions at you, and if you just give me, answers to them as to how you feel, things have kind of gone on without your career, a little bit more about who you are and what you do. I'm just going to kind of fire out some questions, and if you want to just answer them in any way that you see fit. I wanted to start with kind of how you feel digital has changed over the years.
I feel that with digital, people are very expecting of stuff. So it's quite ironic because people want the personal touch when it comes to marketing. They want the right message at the right time, and they want to feel like that message is for you. But on the other hand, if people have the opportunity to block information about ourselves, about how we search or what we're searching on the web, from being collected, we will block that sort of thing. So I find that quite challenging. So there's that expectation for people wanting personal marketing, personal messages and all that. But at the same time, you've got loads of people who are setting up, like, they block cookies and they block ad blocks, sort of. Do you know what I mean? So I find that quite challenging.
There are a lot of ad-free subscriptions coming out there as well. I think these businesses like Hulu and HBO and a couple of others where you can have like ad-free content, but instead of paying $5.99 a month, you'll pay like $11.99 a month. So okay. I think it's little things like that are probably changing in the industry to make us a little bit more kind of savvy towards the changing tide of advertisers trying to get towards people, and marketeers like me and you trying to chase people around the internet for a sale or whatever it might be.
There is 3 other little bits as well. I say information. So how digital is changing over the years. Information is becoming more and more accessible. So people are expecting information for free. So gated content is hard, because if you are putting together some content but asking for someone's email address, people are like, why should I give you that? And we'll go elsewhere. So there is that sort of balance as well. Overload of content. So every man and his day. I'm not very good with my sayings, am I? Every man and his dog has a blog. So I think you need to find a way of being unique and have it 100% unique content, and people expect answers and communication quickly, especially with the rise of social media. So if you've got a question or want to find out an answer, people nowadays, waiting a couple of days or a week isn't good enough. People want an instant answer.
Yeah, completely agree with that. With regards to kind of in your career, kind of any kind of key successes, or is there any campaigns or things that you look at and think, well, that's a really big achievement for what you've done, or what you've done within the team?
Yes. So I'm always a firm believer in content side of things. So content at the end of the day is always, so when I'm talking about content, because content is a big, can mean anything, but I just mean website content. So coming up, creating meaningful and useful content for people, big driver for organic traffic. And we had a success. So we were looking for the year 2018 to last year, and there was a website which was getting traffic around 200 users. Well, yeah, around about 200 users a month, and for 2019 we've grown that to 1,000 users per month, sort of thing. And that was just by sort of understanding what their audience was searching, having a focus on creating quality content, publishing it regularly, sort of thing. So the power of content is really that just speaks volumes to me.
It is quite rewarding seeing that, whether, you know, if you use Ahrefs or Moz or whatever, you know, when you see like the number of keywords ranking in, you know, first page, second page, or top 50 or whatever, when you start to see those graphs really take, you know, start to take that kind of vertical shape of growth when you're seeing kind of your content strategy come through, there is something really rewarding about looking back at that kind of graph and going, we did that.
You kind of want to click your fingers in a sassy way, don't you?
Yeah, I'm so sassy. So yeah, that's with regards to like we meet clients in lots of different scenarios. You know, as an agency, some clients want photography or video, or some people need to, like, it's a brand or it's a startup. Some people come to us and they need to build a new website. But often when people come to us from a digital marketing perspective, it's because they're not quite getting, you know, like a return off their investment from another agency or from the in-house team, or you know, whatever that might be. And sometimes people come to us and they're in this situation where the website might have, the traffic might have plateaued and they're not really seeing any growth. What kind of advice do you give to people when they're kind of at a stalemate with regards to the growth of the kind of traffic?
I always suggest thinking outside the box, sort of thing. So if traffic is plateauing, then you're not reaching the right audience at the right time, and they're not finding you for some reason. So if you're in that situation, just like I don't know, say a client has come to you and they're saying, help us out, we've plateaued, we need to, like, traffic, we're not generating anything anymore. Just start off by brainstorming some ideas. So obviously, first off, you have to have the conversation with the client to understand the audience and who they want to target. Because at the end of the day, you don't want any traffic. You want meaningful traffic, and the right traffic hopefully going to convert. But once you understand who that customer is, then you can brainstorm some ideas of, okay, what campaign can we come up with that will grab their attention and drive them to our website? So it's just about having a fresh look and fresh ideas, and having a safe space where you can just brainstorm a load of ideas.
I think that makes sense, because I think a lot of people, when they're hitting any problems when it comes to traffic or campaigns or whatever, they often look internally instead of looking at working out what the audience wants and working the way backwards from there. So I think it's a really kind of solid piece of advice.
The one thing that I will always look at as well, so Google is always updating its algorithm and stuff. So, for example, in January, Google have just announced that they're rolling out a core algorithm update. So it might be something that, something has happened. So Google's updated their algorithm, or they've changed stuff up, and your content, there's better content out there than you at the moment. It's identify it. So you have to do a bit of diagnosis as well, because there might be something wrong with your website or wrong with something sending traffic. So.
Okay, cool. And just more from a personal level, like, what do you have any kind of morning rituals or routines that you have in your kind of working week to help you, like we were discussing earlier, get the right balance?
Yes. So I've started a new routine as of January 2020. So I've been doing it for 15 days because we're on the 15th of Jan. But my morning routine, I wake up, obviously, I take the dog out for a walk. And when I take the dog out for the walk, I don't take anything with me. I don't take my phone or anything like that, because I like to switch off and just get lost in thoughts or just not think of anything. And then I walk to work, and when I walk to work, I'll listen to a podcast. Sometimes they're marketing podcasts, sometimes they're just fun ones. So one that I really like at the moment is what's his name, Chris Ramsey and his wife. They have one called Shagged, Married, Annoyed, which is hilarious. But anyway, yeah, so I get to work, and then I always go through emails, and then I like see what news is trending in the industry, see what's happening, and then I open up our project management system and see what I've got to do for the day.
Cool. And then just kind of with regards to the kind of, you just mentioned there about a podcast that you listen to. I always like to find out about what books people are reading, or pieces of content or podcasts or videos that people like to recommend to other people. Is there anything that kind of comes to the top of your mind when you think about things that you would recommend to other people?
Well, one thing that I am going to get better at is reading books, because I can't tell you the last time I read a book. So I'm going to be awful on that point. But I always go to, so my sources of information that I go to is Search Engine Journal, because, they're very forefront of what's happening in the industry, and you can find out what's happening. I
on
love...
the ball.
Huh?
They're on the ball with what's going on.
They are on the ball. I love Moz's Whiteboard Friday. So every Friday they'll do a 10-minute video, and they'll pick something about SEO, which is a really nice way to consume content. I listen to different podcasts. So obviously, I actually listened to your podcast this morning on my way to work. Very good. But yes, I listen to other podcasts as well. I don't know. I mean, I don't really stick to this. I wouldn't say that I'm a habit with the same bits of content, but when I come across something, I get a lot of information from LinkedIn or Twitter. So yeah, I think the community on Twitter on sharing stuff is really good. So yeah.
If I could recommend one book for you to read, it was recommended to me by somebody else. I'm partway through it now. It's called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy.
Okay. How long is the book? How many pages are we talking?
It's not that long. I think it's like 250 or something like that. It's a small book, relatively speaking. There are some diagrams, but it's mainly sorry, you're gonna maybe get the audio book if you're not completely
I'm really bad at reading books. I get really bored. I'm a visual person.
Get a free trial on Audible and listen to that. I'm partway through it, and it is probably one of the better books that I've read on like overarching strategy and how you plan stuff. I think that's would be worthwhile. With regards to your overarching career, then I have a funny turn of phrase which I like to ask people, because I've got a favorite failure in my career that I did, and I wouldn't be at where I'm at today if I wouldn't have made this mistake. So I want to ask you the same question. Is there anything that you look back on and go, that was a mistake, but I've really learned from it, or it sent me on a different path, or whatever? Do you have a favorite failure?
Well, I've got a funny one, but it's not related to digital, but it's quite ironic.
That's okay. This is about you, so.
So basically, when I was at uni, I got suspended from the Odeon for sort of selling my own tickets. I wasn't. There was basically an issue with the printer, so the tickets weren't being printed, but you can kind of see that picture. But yeah, someone copied me, and we both got suspended. It was a paid suspension, and during the suspension, I wasn't allowed on the premises. So my friends would go and watch a film, and I'd be like, "Nah, can't go," because I'll be like sent packing. But then, after my suspension, they offered me a promotion, which I thought was quite like, really? Is this my life right now? But the other person who copied me, he got fired. So, I mean, what does that tell you about life? I don't know.
I think what that tells you is that that's an entrepreneurial trait, in that there was a problem and you found a solution. It was illegal. Yes. It was illegal, but you were a ticket tout for however long, and yeah.
See, in my head, you could see that the money was going, like at the end of the day, because the money was going through, the printer just broke. Do you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, they could have seen that the money was right. But yeah, but when it comes to SEO and marketing, I mean, there's lots of things that you try and they don't work, or you don't, or especially when you're working with SEO, there's lots of best practices and stuff that you're doing. And sometimes you don't 100% understand what you're doing and you might make a mistake or something. So I think you always make mistakes, but then that's how you learn, isn't it?
Absolutely. Another kind of left field one. If this is a question that I ask people, and I just think it's kind of it's more around kind of legacy, and it gets quite deep, but it doesn't need to. It can be fun if it needs to be. I think with, you know, like when you look at kind of messages that people send out to the world and consistent messages, if you could put something on a billboard that reaches billions of people across the globe, and it kind of reached most people in the world, what kind of, you know, like a couple of words, an image, a quote, what would it be that you would send out to people?
So a quote that I recently stumbled across was, "Curiosity about life in all its aspects, I think, is still the secret of great creative people." So that's a quote by Leo Burnett, and Leo Burnett was an American advertising executive, and he founded a company, but I think I just come across it somehow. But I really liked that quote because I feel that I've got to where I am today by being curious, being nosy, always asking or trying, being a yes person. So I definitely think curiosity, it like helps creativity and helps you, like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think curiosity is a massive part about being creative, and also I think just working in any kind of marketing profession, you know, you do have to be curious. You have to try things, test hypotheses, split test, all that kind of stuff. You do have to have that in your armory. Yeah, absolutely. With regards to influences within the industry and your career, what are the main kind of people you look up to?
There's quite a few. Okay, I'll try and say this quite quickly. But Brittany Muller, so she is a senior SEO scientist at Moz, and I saw her do a talk, about AI and machine learning, and basically she inspires me because she just learn stuff. So she sort of talked to us how she didn't know anything about machine learning, and now she got herself into it, learned as much as she could, and now she can use it to help her with her SEO and stuff. There's also Izzy Smith, who on her Twitter, she calls herself Nerds Speaker and Technical SEO Analyst, and she also makes hilarious SEO memes. So if you're a meme person, like, look for Izzy Smith on Twitter. So she's really good. Carrie Rose. So we had Carrie Rose on one of our episodes of SEO SAS. But she's a founder of Rise at 7, which is a digital PR link building agency. And some of the campaigns and stuff that she's working on with her clients are really creative, and she's very transparent as well. So I went to a talk during Brighton SEO, and she basically told us how she did stuff, and it was amazing. But she also shares success stories. There's also Dawn Anderson, who she's a very, very intelligent woman when it comes to SEO. She was a speaker at a marketing event that, like, my media run, which is Marketed Live, and she was just like, wow, all the information that she knew was just astonishing. And yeah, she was just very, very knowledgeable. And I think I can breathe now.
And breathe, yes.
Paul Casey
yeah. Not many people say that, especially not my colleagues and the people who work in my team. One of the guys in my team the other day, they made this joke. They was like, "Your podcast sounds like it was recorded on a calculator," and I really took that to heart, because I'm trying my best out here, grinding in these streets, and you know, all I get is this abuse from the team. It's not, you know, it's not cool. That.
My answer would be, well, what are you recording your podcast on? Or what, you don't have one? Shut your mouth. That's what I would.
Fake. Blasted. Right, so we'll wrap up now because I'm sure I've taken up way too much of your time now already. I wanted to end because I always like to give people advice who are looking at getting in the industry. There's a lot of people at local universities and colleges, and I'm trying to support that kind of whole Manchester digital movement and helping people get into digital careers. So just kind of ending on hopefully giving people advice from your experience in your career. If someone was starting out in the industry for the first time, what advice would you give them?
Be curious. I know we've already sort of said that, but be curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions, advice. Just try stuff out. Don't be afraid to try things that don't work, sort of thing. I think curiosity.
And we touched on it a little bit before. What kind of sources of content and information and tips do you find that you actually use? Because there's a lot of information out there, but what are the ones where you really draw, meaningful actions from in terms of content?
Podcasts, search engine journals. So there's so many times where I read an article and then have like a massive to-do list afterwards, and I'm like, why have I done this to myself? Moz, so obviously they've got the Whiteboard Friday, but they've also got their blog and they're just very knowledgeable. But even going to places like Twitter or LinkedIn, they're really good sources. So either like using Twitter and LinkedIn is like search engines and typing in topics to find stuff out, or just see what's trending, see what people are talking about and getting involved. There's always like a Twitter chat, isn't there, going on? But yeah. And
then what I always like to ask people as well, because looking back in your career, I think you make mistakes, but it's good that you make people make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. If you're going back to the kind of Sarah McDowell, who's just finished traveling and she's going into a career, looking to get into a career, what advice would you give your kind of 20-year-old self going back then?
Oh, see, I don't know if you'd like my answer to this, because I'm a firm believer. If you see the film Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, right? So obviously it's sort of, there's a person that gets on the train. No, there's a version of her that gets on the train and a version that doesn't, yeah? And it shows you how different their life would have been. And I would just be so mindful that any advice that I would have given to myself back then would have changed where I am now, because any advice, it might have changed where I ended up working. I wouldn't have met Hannah. I might not have been working at like my media. I might not be running a podcast. So I don't know. Is that a cop out?
Don't get me wrong. That's the deepest answer I've ever had to any question on my podcast. That's like some Back to the Future 3 stuff. Like,
do you know what I mean? Like, I remember
you saying you don't want to change you don't want to change the course of time. I was just thinking of like a helpful tip, like.
Oh, okay. So not like changing.
Meditate or exercise regularly.
Oh, okay. So
not like, it's not like Avengers Endgame where you're trying to change the course of time or Back to the Future or something. But we're going to keep the answer in there because it's how you've interpreted it.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I just went off on that one then, didn't I?
No. Well, I think that's a really good place to end. And I just want to obviously say thank you very much for coming on and taking the time out.
No, thank you.
Really fun speaking to you again.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity and for asking me to be on and allowing me to blab. And I do hope I've given some value to your listeners.
Hopefully. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you at all, Sarah, what's the best way of people contacting you?
Okay, so on Twitter, I am Sarah McDuck. So Sarah MCD UK, Sarah McDuck. Also, the podcast is also on Twitter, SEO_SAS. I'm also on LinkedIn. So just search Sarah McDowell and you'll find me. Also on Instagram, Sarah McDuck again. So I'm on there. And can I just say a little bit about the podcast or just how to listen to that? So SEO SAS is a weekly podcast. New episodes go live every Sunday at 9 p.m. And you can find SEO SAS on any podcast playing platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm your host, Paul Casey. If you'd like to connect with me, find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, the username Casey Digital, or just search for Paul Casey anywhere you find me. Thank you.